Welcome to the Marshall Pruett Podcast and our Week in Sports Cars episode. Graham Goodwin. It's getting close to bedtime this Tuesday evening in the UK. How are you, my friend?
I'd say fair to fabulous, really. It's the closing hours before I hop onto a plane to somewhere sunny for a week with the lovely Mrs. Goodwin, the lovely Mrs. DSC editor, in fact. And I'm looking forward to a little bit of time away from the coalface. Won't stop working, never do, but certainly not quite as intense as it's been through what's already been a long season. And just before we start getting into what's a rather truncated period of long-haul flyaways for the WEC and the Asian Le Mans Series.
And knowing that you're going to be on vacation next week, we have an intent to do the Week in Sports Cars together, but if by chance technology stands in your way, I know you've been working on a potential one-week stand-in.
I'm hoping to reveal the name. It's a big name. I mean, when I say big, I mean big. I don't mean like long, big name. But I'm not going to say quite yet because
Scott
it's
Tucker.
just.
You've got Scott Tucker. No,
that's quite difficult through that kind of thickness of glass.
Greg Lowell, maybe. Greg Lowell.
No. That's even worse. The key to this is, can Cyprus's top internet engineers help me to actually link with the west coast of the United States? If they can, we're good to go. If not, then you might get the guest presenter. It's going to keep people on tenterhooks, I know. They'll all be guessing for the remainder of this week. The Week in Sports Cars next week might be very different.
Very. Well, I am headed down to Monterey here in less than 2 days for at least a day or two of Ren Sport reunion coverage, so I'm looking forward to that. Plan on being down there Thursday and Friday. Had previously planned on being down through Sunday, but I've had a couple of other things take much greater priority, so I think it'll be 2 days down there on behalf of Racer Magazine, Racer.com, and I'm hesitant to announce it now, so I won't. But there is something potentially very special that will be taking place there that I have cooked up with a friend of ours who is a Porsche factory pilot, and it's doing some laps in a car that I don't believe has turned laps since 1990. So we'll see if all that works out, and I'd be lying if I said it would fall so much in the Week in Sports Cars domain. Might be a little bit more in the Week in IndyCar domain. So, yeah, anyways, hoping all that happens. Hoping that I have both footage and audio and all pictures to show. But, yeah, can't wait to get down for Ren Sport Reunion. It is the best thing in the world. I've never driven a Porsche, which is still one of the funniest things. I can't tell you how many days, years of my life I've spent either loving, covering, competing against, you name it, Porsche. I've never actually driven one of their machines, but hey, heading down to give them love at the reunion's an easy one for me.
Well, it's a bizarre one. I have driven a few Porsches, but the very first Porsche I ever drove was diesel, and they've just announced that they're ceasing production in diesels. So it was supremely comfortable, by the way, a very, very good car indeed. But it was, I'm afraid, a diesel. I can just hear all the Porsche fanatics actually tearing out the remaining hair that they may well still have at that news. But since then, I have driven some rather more traditionally wonderful Porsche machinery, but it was, I'm afraid, one of Dr. Rudolph's evil twins that was my first experience. So then,
yeah, I guess we have to kill that story we were ready to file on the new Porsche diesel LMP1 program for next year.
Yeah,
so
that's gone.
Definitely sad about that.
Well, I come to you this week, MP, from what was an incredibly soggy Spa-Francorchamps for the European Le Mans Series penultimate round, where we had an astonishing array of happenings, one of which was common sense from a race organizer on the news of an incoming storm front, which absolutely would have meant that we got a complete washout for the 4-hour race. They decided to bring forward the race by almost 2 hours. We got, therefore, around 2 hours of track time, half the race gone. And what we saw in that half the race was that because only half points were awarded, effectively that put the nail in the title. It means that G-Drive Racing become another team that will go to the Le Mans 24 Hours. We have the irony, therefore, that G-Drive Racing know now that they're going to be racing at the Le Mans 24 Hours in 2019 before they know whether or not they finish the race in 2018. Because obviously we're waiting at some point in the coming week for a decision from the FI Court of Appeal on finally the race result for the Le Mans 24 Hours in LMP2 after the controversy of the changes that were made by TDS Racing, who ran the 26 car, that finished first on the road, but was then excluded for adding in an additional component to effectively defeat the fuel fill restrictor. So all sorts of bizarreness, including a rather nasty incident involving Jean-Eric Verne, who rather clumsily managed to eliminate 2 other cars from the race. And had we gone to full distance, then that car would not have been confirmed as the championship winner. As it turned out, the ability to earn full points being withdrawn from their competitors, it is the 26 car, and Roman Rusinov and Andrea Pizzitola who come out as being the European Le Mans Series champions. Verne missing out, by the way, because he was on Formula E duty for the first round. So that was my weekend, which was great fun, if a little soggy.
And minus that sogginess, now that you have been able to dry out a bit, should we jump right into questions? I mean, granted, you just mentioned essentially a massive amount of news just coming out of the weekend you were in, but should we get into questions and keep driving the conversation forward? Thanks to our friends, both across the trio of awesomeness that is Reddit, Twitter, and Facebook.
Absolutely, and another bumper bundle, dozens and dozens of high-quality questions, and more, by the way, coming in because it's been a busy day of news around the Twitter sphere and the internet and beyond, with some news pertinent to IMSA and LMP2. I'm sure we'll come on to cover that one later. LMP3, beginning to unwrap the way that the new cars in 2020 will happen there, and further movements with LMP1 and Hypercar and all things there. But for me, I mean, the opening kind of gambit was actually a car we saw for the first time, MP, as we arrived at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit early on Saturday morning. And it was a white, looked a little bit kind of Super GT type, small prototype, turned out to be based on an LMP3 and a DES chassis, quite a rare beast.
But they're popping up in strange places.
They are indeed, and this one is a very strange one because this is a hydrogen electric powered car, the H24 program, out of the Green GT operation that initially was slated to put together a Garage 56 car for the Le Mans 24 Hours some few years ago. That didn't happen. I'm afraid we've had a couple of them fall short on budgetary terms, but it appears now that the ACO, the Automobile Club de l'Ouest, the organisers of the Le Mans 24 Hours, have invested in that program and are going to use that technology program as effectively as a tech demonstrator to move forward. We know already that the new grandstand and pits complex that will be in place for 2023, 2024, that has been designed to have the ability to have a hydrogen and alternative fuels network built into it. So the infrastructure will be there to fulfill the needs of anybody that wants to go with a zero emissions car. Because this is the extraordinary thing about these cars, of course, is that what is produced as effectively exhaust fume, the only byproduct, if you like, from that is water. So interesting stuff. Not a lot to really say yet about that program. It's very early days, but high-ranking officials from the European Union, European Commission were on site. So Yannick Dalmas was actually driving this thing with a technical 650 horsepower of power from that power plant. Other familiar faces around too. But we have had a number of questions about that from Stefan Moore. Says, since mission H24 is out, what's our thoughts on alternative fuels, hydrogen, electricity, and motorsport cars in general? Tom Bacon is asking, is the appearance of the hydrogen vehicle at Spa over the weekend a realistic glimpse at the future of our sport? And our good friend and right turn lover, are we likely to see H24 as a Garage 56 entry? Any insight into why the LMS? That's a separate thing to do with ELMS calendar, which we've also had over the weekend. I think the answer from me on that one, on are we going to see H24 itself as a Garage 56 entrant? Probably not. It is very much to prove things like the viability of the infrastructure that's going to be required. They did actually fuel the car on pit lane from kit that was actually stored in the garage. It was certainly runnable at pace. It was not yet raceable. It is, however, early days. And as one or two people have pointed out, there was another project oddly enough, on an Odess LMP3 chassis run by a Dutch group, which is actually out and doing some racing at the moment. So it is technology that is maturing. We know, don't we, MP, that BMW are interested in looking into whether or not the new regulations that follow the current ones we're expecting, so say 2024, that they are interested to see whether or not that might be an avenue that they could come back into the top level of the sport. And at the moment are engaging, I suspect, to make sure that decisions aren't made for 2020 that get in the way of where they would like to be in 4 or 5 years' time. It might be that they decide to come in earlier with something a little more conventional, just to, rub the rusty bits off the race team, if you like. But interesting times. What do I think about alternative fuels?
Yeah.
It's coming. The reality is here. We could be Luddite about it, but it is coming. Things don't stand still. In all sorts of ways, we've got to look at what comes next and what comes after that. And I'm not at home to, look at where we've come to from the days when the only reason for a Toyota Prius was for someone to be in some way carping it in the media about how wonderful a person they were. It's not like that anymore. I'm sure you've driven hybrid cars, MP, yes?
I have. Not many, but yes, I have.
And I've certainly seen in the few occasions on which I've driven them a massive difference in, let's say, 3/4 of a decade between the usability, the relevance, the accessibility of that technology. It's not a whim anymore. It is actually making a difference. It is far more efficient. The advantages of using it are far clearer, made far clearer. The accessibility of that efficiency is greater and greater with every iteration of the technology that makes its way forward. It's the same with electric vehicles. Saw for the first time today, oddly enough, a brand new version. I think it's the Mark II Nissan Leaf on the roads around my home here in the UK. And again, you're looking there at another step forward in terms of efficiency. A good friend of mine, for the first time, took me on a pretty long trip in a Tesla for the first time. I've sat in the things, I've experienced the things over short drives, but not the full range of tech. Impressive stuff. You cannot ignore that is the direction that technology is beginning to take. And that is going to have to be taken into account across the whole gamut of motorsports, not just in the what have been thus far pretty niche products that are going full electric.
Yeah, and oddly enough, as someone who lives in Tesla's hometown, I've only sat in a Tesla. I've never actually gone for a ride in one. So that's maybe I'm failing as a resident of Fremont, California. My only question, which was unanswered regarding the new hydrogen prototype, is whether, as you'll sometimes find next to a stream or something where there's a good natural water source where you can rock up with your bottle and fill it up at the little spout. Are they planning on just leaving the car running between sessions?